Thank you. All right, let's get set up here. Hey everyone, excited to be here. Quick show of hands. How many of you have children age 10 to 15? A handful? Okay. These are my kids, 7, 10, and 11. I show you this so that you can connect with me and like me more. But also, if you have kids around this age, so back left is Banner, he's 11. To the right, the toughest of the group, Abby, she's 10. In the middle, the most rambunctious is Ryder. If you have kids this age, you might start to realize that as every day goes by, you become less and less relevant or connected to their world. The choices they make and what they want to wear, the way they want to style their hair, the things that they say, they're just out of this world, you know, and every generation does it, but this generation, Gen Alpha specifically, has done it exponentially more than others. And a big part of that is because of something called brain rot. You guys heard this phrase? This was Oxford's 2024 phrase of the year, brain rot. And it speaks to, it's the name of the language that they speak. The casual slang terms that they throw around all the time, it's called brain rot. There's so many weird, strange words that they decided to call it something, and it's called brain rot. And it's from internet culture, it's from TikTok and YouTube and memes and Roblox and all the things that their world is surrounded by these days. And so I thought it would be fun, since we're talking about relevance today, to see how relevant you all are when it comes to brain rot. So we're gonna do a little brain rot trivia, and here's how it's gonna work. I have these really fun, cute little brains. If you get a trivia question right, I'm gonna chuck this at you, and you get one. However, when I ordered them on Amazon, spent $2 on them, I didn't realize they're kind of sticky. So I'm gonna keep, the ones that I throw will still be in the plastic, okay? So that way they don't, you know, get all gooped up. So we're gonna go through these, and if you get a correct answer, I want you just to shout it out, and I'm gonna throw this your way. Sound good? Okay. It's also after lunch, so I was like, I gotta have something that gets people a little bit, you know, out of their food coma. Okay, so if a kid says skibbity, what are they most likely referencing? A type of dance move? A viral meme series with toilets? A slang word for awesome? Or a Snapchat filter?
B, toilet.
The answer, B. Did you say it? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna try to not hit someone. Hey! All right. Okay. Next up. Man, you guys are really bad at that. That was fun. All right. If a Gen Alpha kid says cap, what do they mean?
Lie.
That's awesome. That's a lie. That's a secret. I heard lying. Is this table on fire or what? Man.
It's a school district, people. So
Oh, of course. Of course, the school people. Yep. That's a lie. Yeah. I hear my son say all the time, like, Dad, I did the dishes, no cap. And I'm like, maybe just translate that for me. All right. What does Riz mean? I should have not had multiple choice. You guys are getting close. All right, here we go. I'll give it to you anyway. Having money, agreeing with what was just said, having a flirtatious charm. See, I heard it over here.
Do we get extra credit if we say aura?
Maybe that's coming up. Good aura. Who said it over here? I heard someone. Allie? All right, I'm gonna. Oh, intercepted! You should get to keep that. That was a good catch. All right, 2 more. I gotta go quick. I gotta get these multiple options up here before you start guessing. All right, when Gen Alpha kids hear 6 and 7, what do? Give hugs and high fives, go play Roblox, make crude jokes, or start yelling, screaming, and shouting? Oh, no clue on this one? Lots of B. The answer, D. Yes, I heard D over here. Yes. All right, last one. Now this is, oh, it's meaningless. It's superfluous. There is no, don't try to understand. It's just, I don't get it. All right, last one. This one's like advanced level. I didn't know this one. All right, if a kid says phantom tax, what are they talking about? A fortnight penalty, taking someone's food without asking, stealing someone else's boo, losing a bet online? The answer's B. I think B was over here. All right, I'm not hit the nice projector. All right, good job. Okay, so since we're talking about relevance today, I thought this would be a fun way just to kind of connect the dots. Now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about brands, something that's maybe a little bit easier to understand than Gen Alpha kids. At Matchstic, we think brands need to do two things well in order to become a powerful, strong force for a business. One is you need to be incredibly different. You need to understand what it is that makes you unique and tap into that. And then you also need to understand your audience and what does your audience really need. And where those two things overlap, that's where you should build a brand from. So that's kind of the core, the essence of what a brand should stand for, and then everything should sort of radiate out from that place. We see in most markets that brands maybe do one or the other really well. So sometimes there is a brand that's really tapped into the value proposition, but they're sort of in a sea of sameness. So if we look at like the car market, just as an example, this is where Hyundai maybe would be. You know, it's like the value proposition's pretty good, but if you swap out a Hyundai logo on the hood of a sedan, are you really going to care? Is it really going to make that much of a difference? Maybe not. On the top left, where someone's really tapped into what it is that makes them unique and different, but not connected to their audience and what makes them relevant, that would be more of an outlaw brand. So for the car example, I like to think about Bugatti. You know, it's like unbelievable performance, unbelievable price tag, very niche audience. That's more of an outlaw brand. And then maybe Tesla or Toyota would be someone that does that really well. They're radical and they're relevant. But a lot of times there's also brands that dip down here and they don't do either of those things well into that dated category. And like Saturn maybe would have been an example of that is no longer with us, RIP Saturn. But a dated brand is one that just loses its connection to the audience and loses its connection to the market and what really makes it unique and special, and it just sort of slips down into that dated category over time. And there are four main reasons that I see of why brands lose their relevance over time. I'm sure you all have others that you could add to it. But one is that brand is simply ignored or neglected. It's just not an investment. Or it doesn't seem important to the business. Growing up, my dad owned a finance business, and to this day, he doesn't understand what I do. He doesn't understand brand, and it was just not part of his business model or his world. To him, business was all about relationships, and it was just these long-standing contracts that had nothing to do with this foreign term brand, and that's true for a lot of businesses today. A lot of times also it's a set it and forget it kind of approach to a brand. Hey, we did a rebrand 10 years ago, we launched it, and it's still good, but over time, gravity pulls it apart or it starts to lose its relevance over time. Sometimes organizations have an internal subjective bias. I see this a lot with CEOs or CMOs that I work with. They just love the way they currently look. They think the logo is perfect. They think the message is perfect, but everyone else behind closed doors is like, we're so dated. And so sometimes there's just an internal subjective bias. And I have to say to our clients a lot of times, I'm going to hand you a t-shirt that says you are not the target audience, because it's not really about what you like or what you think it looks good. It's about what will work with the audience instead. Also, sometimes brand is seen as a marketing only thing. It's an effort that goes kind of in the marketing department and gets relegated over to that. And it's certainly most appropriately there in the marketing category. However, brands should influence an organization's culture. It should influence product. It should influence the operations of the organization. There's an opportunity for it to prevail across multiple departments throughout, not just marketing. And sometimes that causes brands that creates an inability for them to deliver on what they're promising from the marketing perspective. And then lastly, brands just don't understand their audience a lot of times. And I'm going to share some examples of that today as well. So before we go further, I want to talk a little bit more about relevance, because this is an important part to acknowledge. And it's really around the fact of trends. Like we were just talking about with slang words and Gen Alpha, trends come and go. And so how do you build a brand that creates long-term value, but also can sort of ride the ups and downs of trends? And that's a really difficult thing to do both. So with trends, they come and go. An example that I like to show is this is an artist, a graphic designer named David Carson from the late 90s. So when I was in design school, I thought David Carson was the most incredible designer. I wanted to mimic everything that he did. But now when I look at it many decades later, it just sort of reeks of the 90s. Like you see the grunge era in it. And it's you know, it's not as relevant as it once was to me. And we see this a lot in fashion. Like everyone acknowledges that fashion trends come and go. So if you were to take someone from the 1940s in the top left and transport them to the 80s right below that, their mind would have been blown, right? They would think, what are these crazy people in the future wearing? So we acknowledge and understand in fashion trends come and go. And the same thing happens in graphic design also, and in brand identity and with approach to corporate identity. You see a lot of trends come and go over time. And this is an example of where we are right now. Right now in brand design, we are in the hyper simplification trend, usually under the guise or the umbrella of modernization, right? That's what everyone says. We want it to be more modern. And when you look at this list, some I don't mind, but when you look at the afters on the right, you just see a lack of personality. You see sort of the character being stripped out that I think is a missed opportunity for a lot of these brands. Jaguar obviously is one that got a lot of blowback in the way that they were kind of really pushing into that outlaw messaging. Like they really went for it on all levels and probably missed their core audience. And then another example of this that you're all likely familiar with, Cracker Barrel. Who here has been to a Cracker Barrel in the last 12 months? Wow, that's pretty good. I'm impressed. Wow, okay. If you raise your hand, you have a right to say whether or not you liked it or didn't like it. I haven't been to a Cracker Barrel in a while, even though I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, which is close to where they're headquartered. But when I saw this, I was appalled. And the reason I was appalled, like technically speaking, did anyone in this room do this? Okay, I didn't think so, but that would have been, that was like, okay, next slide. Technically speaking, the design is better on the right. Like the typography on the right, the simplicity on the right, all better with the design principles. The logo on the left is super strange when you really look at it and analyze, like, what is that bean shape? Why is old Herschel so detailed and the barrel so detailed? It's a real strange. And when you look at it, you're like, I don't like any of this, but it represents something much bigger than just that artwork that's there. And as they started to implement new interiors, people really thought, what's happening to what Cracker Barrel is and what it represents? And it was really a positioning issue that was missed. And it was really an audience issue that was missed. The design works fine. They just were designing it with the wrong audience in mind moving forward. And so we have to be careful in the world of branding to think about, we want to be more relevant, but we can't fall into the trap of doing different tropes or different trends like we saw with Cracker Barrel. So I want to talk a little bit about branding big picture and zoom out some. Growing up as a kid, I had the privilege of flying with my dad. He had a small plane, and we would take fishing trips together. And one time we were going from Nashville, Tennessee to Flippin, Arkansas, which is a real place, Flippin, Arkansas. And normally it's like an 8-hour drive, but a couple hours by flight. So it made it much more accessible. And on one trip, we had a terrible headwind where, I mean, it was like, are we even flying? You're looking down and like school buses are passing you on the interstate. And you're like, how are we aloft right now? And it took 3 or 4 hours and it was super bumpy and the headwind just slowed us down and it was just a mess. But on that same trip on the return flight home with the jet stream and the tailwind, it's 2 hours, smooth sailing, and we're there. And I like this example or this metaphor for brand because a brand really should be a tailwind that's helping push the organization forward, that's helping make an impact for the organization, where the teams are aligned, they understand what they stand for, they're able to make the right decisions and to serve customers or clients well. But oftentimes it becomes this headwind that gets in the way and slows us down and creates chaos, creates indecision or disagreement. So really brand is like that wind in the sails that should be pushing an organization forward. But a lot of times it ends up being this, where that headwind is just causing chaos. And so the way that you can really understand whether your brand is helping or hurting is something that's in the book and that we talk to a lot of our clients with. It's called the Super Six. And these are 6 factors that strong brands should be doing really well. And depending on how you measure with these, helps you understand whether your brand is helping or hurting, whether it's preventing from making a difference or it's propelling you going forward. So I'm going to cover these, and then we're going to get into 3 things that I think can help everyone just think about how to become a little bit more radically relevant, whether that's the brand for your agency, or maybe that's the brand that you run, or maybe just the brands that you serve, they're your clients. So the first one is clarity, and Mickey had the quote on this one. That's the chapter on clarity. The quote is, "Don't sacrifice clarity on the altar of distinction." And I see this a lot with startups, with founders that have this big vision, and they're like, "Oh no, it's not. It's like e-commerce meets the future, and it's more like this and that." And they give you all these categories, and you're like, "I don't understand at all what your business is. That makes no sense." But they want it to be so distinct and different, like it's a new category, but then they lose their audience on just helping meet them where they are. So clarity is just making sure that your product or service you're offering is easily understood, making sure that you don't let the creativity get in the way of that at first. A lot of times I see clarity kind of lose points when there's sub-brands involved, when there's products or services that are branded also, and they start to compete with what is the brand, what is the product, or what is a benefit? Why does that feature have a logo for it, that looks different than the actual parent brand? So clarity is also about just making sure you have a clear brand architecture and that your messaging is straightforward and easily understood. Second is distinction, and this is about visual and verbal distinction. So who are the closest competitors that you have, and are you strategically using color, type, layout, and language to be different than those close competitors? Third is control, and this is about consistency. So we know from different studies that if you can show up across all channels consistent as a brand, you're much more likely to capture revenue. So how are you putting systems and governance and guidelines and asset managers in place so that you can show up consistent? That's what control is all about. The next one is attraction. For this one, I like to say that brand often is a metaphorical storefront. And as people walk by, you want them to stop and say, "Oh, I wonder what's in there." And you want them to engage with whatever it is that you're selling. And then the next one is, do they buy that product or service, feel like it had high value, you delivered on your promises, and then they return because of that. So you can attract the right ideal audiences, but if you don't actually deliver, it doesn't matter if it's a revolving door. So devotion is, are you creating long-term value as a brand? And then the last one is alignment. Alignment is all about making sure staff and leadership understand what the brand stands for and how they deliver on it, to make sure that the get rights are really clear. So sometimes brands, they do a good job with mission, vision, values, but are they clear on really what their brand positioning is? Or are they clear on the operational get rights that they need to deliver on every time? So that's what alignment is about. Okay, so if you want to go take this assessment, there's an online way to do it that's totally free. RadicallyRelevantBrand.com. It's about 10 minutes and you'll get a score. And there's a couple tips in there also that'll tell you, hey, based on where you landed, here are some things to consider. So go check that out if you're interested. And now I want to get into 3 different pieces that I think can help almost anybody in terms of becoming more radically relevant. And I'm going to share some examples in here as well. And the first is, if you want to be more radically relevant, you have to have a clearly defined and documented brand strategy. And that's nothing new. You guys know that if you're in the agency world, or if you've been managing or leading a brand for a while, you know that you have to get clear on what you stand for and what you're all about. The difference that I would propose is sometimes people think it's mission, vision, values, which is great corporate strategy. But when I say a clearly defined brand strategy, we think of it in these terms, that there's a personality that's documented, that leadership aligns on and says, yeah, that's what we're that's how we want to be perceived. That should be our personality. Positioning is when you clearly state what makes you different and special in the market. Personas are typically just your target audience. The P just allows it to be, a little alliterative, which is nice, lots of P's in there. And then the value proposition that you provide to that ideal target audience. So you have to get really clear on what these things are on paper before you get into brand creation going forward. As an example, if we were going to create a brand that's warm, welcoming, established, and transparent, if these were brand attributes, that's very different than a brand that's lively, sharp, audacious, and nurturing. And this is a great way that we try to get executives aligned, because they might not have an opinion on color, but you can get them to agree on certain words and what they mean to them. And then we'll translate those into different mood boards or different routes to have another sort of workshop discussion on, hey, to us, this is sort of what lively looks like, or to us, this is what nurturing starts to look like. And you have a really good discussion and alignment before you ever get into anything that's custom creative at this kind of stage and level. And I want to share a story of some work that we did with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Any AJC fans in here? A few? Okay, we're just a handful. All right, we're going to change that. The AJC, they came to us and they said, hey, we have new investment with Cox. We have a new editor-in-chief, and we want to be a modern media company. We're ready. We're ready to go for it. And we have a new logo that we want you to build a system around. And if you're familiar with the AJC, they had just launched that black letter a couple years before this. And we said, are you sure about the new logo? And they're like, oh yeah, new logo's in. We hate the black letter. We want to be a modern media company. The black letter doesn't say modern media company at all. Okay. So they're like, will you help? And we said, yeah, are you open? Are you open to like considering a different approach if the strategy suggests that? And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll consider it. So we went through the strategy process and we helped them understand kind of the brand positioning. And there's really, in the media space, there's a couple categories. You can provide unmatched premium content, which is the subscription space. You can be about the community and building community and a deeper understanding of Atlanta. There's some competitors in that sort of column. Or it can be all about convenient delivery, which is, getting news instantly on your phone or some other way. And for them, they're in the unmatched premium content product leadership category. There's no denying that. They're trying to build a business model that gets a lot of subscribers. So there's no arguing with that. You guys are in this category. So we have an opportunity to build a brand that reinforces you as a product leader in the space. And we said, oh, and right now, a trend, a cultural moment is that people love nostalgic brands. There's a quote in here that nostalgia is a balm for an increasingly anxious public. We go back to things that feel trusted and comfortable. And we said, so maybe something that is from your archives isn't a bad thing. Maybe that's a way to kind of showcase more of that legacy. And we said there are hundreds of media brands in Atlanta and in the region, but you're the only one that's been around for 150 plus years. Why would you throw that out to become a modern media brand? So thinking about their radical relevant positioning, we kind of put some things that makes them different on one side, what makes them more relevant on the other. And we said, you know what, you're a premium legacy brand built on hard-hitting, deeply dedicated reporting and service to the South. We put all of this kind of down on a one-page document. We captured it also in this idea of substance and soul, which they're using currently as kind of like a masthead or a tagline. We got clear on who the audience is and then some of those attributes as well. And from here, we went and explored different creative routes, one of which was a black letter. And you guys know this, if you start to tippy-toe past like what a client has said, you're like, I can probably do that once. But then if they slap my hand, like we're done, we can't do that any longer. And the team we were presenting to, they liked the black letter, but they were like, our leadership will never go for it. So we weren't sure where it was gonna go. And this is the exact same time that this happened. And this came out, and on national news, the cover of the AJC was being circulated. And the executive director said, you know, that black letter actually looks pretty good in there. I don't mind it after all. And the biggest problem is they wanted to brand the AJC. And with this particular black letter, the J, the bowl of the J, awkwardly hits the A. And so we just fixed it. We just fixed that. And we redid the black letter in a way that would help it be a premium legacy brand. The J turns down, and from there, it totally works. So the strategy process helped us build a foundation of trust and for them to better understand the opportunity they had as a brand moving forward. And then we were able to create something that still feels like a modern media agency brand, but it leverages their past and it leverages the legacy going forward. And this to me is a good example of how Cracker Barrel could have approached it also. I really think they could have taken some of the legacy that they had, but still modernized it, but just in a maybe more appropriate way. Part of what I want to share also is the idea that brands need to be alive and flexible. So a brand doesn't need to show up the same way all the time. So we try to provide tools like this of, hey, if you have a functional application that's just all about maybe clicks or purchase, make it functional like these examples. If you have something that's more expressive and more mass market, here are ways that you can do that. And we created a system that allowed them to do it. Okay, the second point I want to get to is around being obsessed with your audience. And you all know this, especially in the web world. It's all about user flows, user journey, being obsessed with your audiences. But sometimes at the brand level, brands miss that. They miss out on it. And this is an example that I think is fascinating of how for years Stanley was focused on the construction worker, the outdoorsman, the rugged, tough product that you could drop, from the top of a skyscraper and it would still work. And then a new marketing director came in and said, hey, have you ever thought about changing the audience? Well, maybe there's others out there to be interested in this product, and then their business has gone gangbusters, and they're a cultural icon now just because someone said, are you sure that's our audience? Is there another opportunity? And so sometimes we can really miss out on who the audience actually is at the brand level, and we have to get really clear on who that is so that we can empathize with their world and think about how that brand becomes even more relevant. A quick story here. We worked with Tiger Woods and his foundation. Fun fact, Tiger Woods logs onto Microsoft Teams calls and his name just says boss on there, which I thought was hilarious. Good to know. He logged on, I was like, boss, okay, all right. He has a foundation that provides STEAM education, and they have these learning lab environments. They have one in Anaheim, California, and they've done really well. And he wanted to grow them. So they approached us and said, hey, we want to scale this brand across the country, but we're not sure it's the right brand. We want to attract students that are non-traditional learners. The brand is TGR Learning Lab. So we were like, well, we have some work to do considering it says learning. Probably non-traditional learners don't want to go to more school, And by the way, your current look and feel feels academic, feels institutional, feels like a nonprofit. Maybe we need to talk to some students to see what would resonate with them more. And so we had some quotes in here, like, I heard it was a place to take classes. I had no idea it would be so fun. Or a parent, learning lab sounds boring. When kids go, they go to play, not to learn, and learning is the byproduct of play. So we said, we need to think about this differently and have fun and play expressed directly in the brand as we try to attract these non-traditional learners. And we even said from an architecture perspective, this is all of the ecosystem of brands for TGR, Tiger. And we said, you're thinking about the foundation and this Learning Lab brand as an institutional nonprofit, but you're not thinking about it as a consumer brand. And that's what we want to make that shift. This should be a student-obsessed consumer brand, not just a nonprofit. And we said, if that's the case, like we learned earlier with Gen Alpha slang, vibes are really valuable. They're expecting imaginative, creative, AI-driven worlds that are unlike anything else they've seen, not necessarily this. So through that strategy, through those discussions, we're able to kind of bring more life and energy and excitement to the way that they think about their whole brand communications. A lot of our research also said that students want to, like the forensic crime, forensic files class, they were like, I had no idea that it was about like solving murders, like forensic. I didn't know what forensic was. So we started just a visual approach to where we could put more tangible things in the artwork to help kids understand, like, oh, crime scene tape, I know what that is. That looks kind of interesting. So we're trying to make the programming a little bit more relatable and relevant to the kids' world. We also equipped their team with an assortment of ways to approach their social media campaigns. And a big part of maintaining relevance as a brand is this idea of having a visual system that's fixed and flexible. And what that means is at the top level, having brand assets that are fixed, that are things you invest in over time, you want people to recognize, you want there to be trust and credibility and recall with those on that level. Typically it's a logo, core colors, maybe typefaces. And then below that are flexible assets that could come and go as trends come and go. So a lot of the aesthetic that we just showed, the scribbles, the collage, that could be irrelevant in a few years. And that's okay because the brand is anchored by the fixed elements up above it. And those flexible elements could come and go almost like a campaign would. So we try to equip our clients to have fixed and flexible visual systems that can evolve as their audiences evolve as well. So a couple thoughts on that, and then we'll get into some Q&A. I like to think about fixed and flexible systems the way that movies are produced and have been produced. So branding used to be a lot like a blockbuster movie production where it was like, you know, every 10 years we're going to do a big rebrand and a ton of money and we're going to invest in this big thing. But really it should be more like the way a series is produced these days, where Stranger Things, it launches, it establishes the plot and the theme and the characters and the genre, but then season 2 comes out, same genre, same general themes, maybe the plot changes a little bit, maybe a new character's introduced. Season 3 comes out, another new character, but it's still the same genre. And that's really the way that brands should think about their visual and verbal systems, not necessarily like a big one and done, set it and forget it type of an approach. So I'm going to get through this example really quick just because I'm a little over time. Rainbird is a global irrigation manufacturer. They had really inconsistent communications from a brand perspective. However, we could not touch their logo because they had millions of dollars worth of machinery that suggested we shouldn't touch it. And so we worked with them to think of the strategy and define the core parts of how their brand should show up going forward. Type, color, imagery, different graphic elements. We put a lot of motion and movement with it. And then from that sort of palette of or tools in their toolbox, they are able to create an endless amount of campaigns, of creative assets that go into print or digital applications. This was a model we helped them think through how to be more product focused, market focused, or brand focused. And then they're creating things like this with all those tools and different assets. And most recently, they produced this campaign that got rid of a lot of those graphic assets, but still kept the type and the mark and the imagery there. So the idea is radically relevant brands should evolve over time. They should not just be a one and done type of a mentality. As an example of that, you really can, it's a little bit hard to see here, but year one, maybe that's the rebrand or the refresh. And then you launch that and you should measure it. You should see, is this working? Are we seeing a notable difference? And if not, you can start to adjust. Maybe you introduce secondary colors, another typeface. Maybe the language needs to be adjusted. Then you can train and re-implement. Year 3, same exact thing. Maybe year 4, you're doing more significant changes. You're thinking about positioning or something maybe larger than that. But there really is an evolutionary mindset that should be attached to the way companies think about their brand going forward. And so if you have that mindset, you go from this chaos where everyone's reacting and they're creating communications as quickly as possible with what they think looks good, but it's actually a little disconnected from their market, or it's blending in like their competitors. You can go from that to this. All right, question time. Thank you.